Welcome, everyone, to today's xTalk. Thanks for coming out. My name is Jovi Nazarino. I'm a learning science education outreach specialist with the residential education team in open learning. So today's xTalk is about elevating your instructional impact, Canvas Innovation Fund stories. We will start off with a brief introduction on what the Canvas Innovation Fund is. And then we have two special guest speakers today to share their experience with their projects from the Canvas Innovation Fund. So let me first just share a little bit about our two speakers who are here today. We have Jungwoo Chun and Andreas Karatsolis. Jungwoo is a lecturer in climate, sustainability, and negotiation in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. And Andreas Karatsolis is the director of the Writing, Rhetoric, and Professional Communication program, as well as a senior lecturer. So they both will share in their different contexts and courses what they were able to do and how things turned out from their Canvas Innovation Fund. Before we get into their presentations, my colleague Erin Kessler, who is the Associate Director of Learning Sciences and Teaching, will just kick things off and just give us a little info about the Canvas Innovation Fund. So Erin, you can go ahead, kind of hand things off to you, and then we'll have Jungwoo and Andreas present. And we'll have time for Q&A after.
Perfect. Thanks, Jovi. All right, we're going to share that. Can everybody see that? We're good? Well, thanks everybody for jumping in. For those that aren't familiar, the Canvas Innovation Fund is a fund that we run each summer. Our office is responsible for facilitating, and the goal is really as a way to help MIT instructors transform their subjects on Canvas. This is a way for us to get sort of what we know are instructional effective practices into the structures of Canvas sites, but also think about what that means for the pedagogy that goes along with it. So it's not just the sort of technical, it's also the instructional, it's the learning, it's all of these pieces coming together to sort of make decisions about how best to sort of transform these courses. Um, we see a wide range of innovations that have been done as part of the CIF over the last couple of years. As you'll hear today, things like integrations from Panopto, which is our video service, to the MITx residential site being integrated with pieces like Jungwoo mentioned. We've seen other pieces like Panopto, Perusal, other pieces of integrated tools that are set up to integrate directly into Canvas and support those endeavors, as well as other just pedagogical approaches that didn't have anything to do with tools, like flipping the classroom. I've got sets of videos already available. I want my in-class instruction to be much more active, and so can we get the videos up in a way that students can do that? I want my students to actively engage outside of classrooms around discussions and other pieces. What might it look like to build that out? So these are all examples of some projects that we've done in the past that may resonate with some of the people in the room. Um, the idea here is really that the people who are brought into the fund select an undergraduate who they want to work on the project, and then our team hires that undergraduate, trains them, and helps them facilitate the project with the instructor over the course of the summer. So if you're interested in any of these things, the applications are currently open, so you can actually check those out. And oh, Joey beat me to it in the chat in terms of being able to go check those pieces out. I will note one quick thing for those instructors in the room who might be interested in CIF. We've sort of purposely designed the summer work to be something that is manageable. So from your perspective, what is the sort of like if I want to get involved, what does it entail? It entails a small application. It's actually pretty straightforward and doesn't require that much information. Just sort of what courses do you want to work on? What is the general thing that you're trying to do or problem you're trying to solve? Those applications are due April 27th. Once projects are selected, usually the week or two after the deadline, you'll select a student to work with you, preferably an MIT undergrad. It's been our experience that we've found people who have taken the course previously or been UTAs for the class are really successful in these types of positions. So you select a student to work with. We'll do all of the training and the work to go into that, and we'll have a kickoff meeting where we'll hear about your course. We'll learn all about the things that you're trying to accomplish, and then sometime between that and the middle of the summer, we'll meet again. And in that second meeting, we sort of talk around what are some options. What do we think might be good solutions? We'll maybe give us some examples. We'll build some demo sites. Do the sort of hard work of sort of putting together ideas of what might function for you and your objectives. And then you make some choices about, okay, this is where the direction I'd like to go. This is how I'd like to see it move forward. And then we sort of implement that through the rest of the summer, where we finally have a handoff meeting. We meet with you at the end of the summer to give the course sort of back to you along with all of the documentation. So we create documents around what were the design decisions, what specific pieces did we put in place, what are the next steps that need to be done in order to make the site finalized and ready for students to engage in it. And so this gives you an idea of like what the requirements are from the instructor standpoint. I think both Jungwoo and Andreas can speak more about their experience with some of that as well and sort of how this played out for their specific projects. But I'm excited to hear the sort of results of their CIF work and how it played out for them. So I'll stop sharing and hand it off to Jungwoo.
Thanks, Aaron and Jovi, for inviting me to share my experience. I have nothing but praise for Lauren Totino and the staff and the student, Angeline, who helped us vastly improve our course page and our course experience. So I think I've become the unofficial ambassador for the Campus Innovation Fund. I've been telling my colleagues in the department to really use this opportunity. And I think most instructors are initially concerned how much time would be required to effectively use this opportunity. And I can tell you for sure that it's really nothing more than what was advertised. And the amount of support you'll get is tremendous. And we're continuing to improve our course experience based on what was enabled by the program. So I'm very thankful, and I'll continue to nudge my colleagues to apply because I'm sure it will improve their courses as well. So I currently teach two courses primarily in the department, both of which are clinics. 11074, 274 is the course that I initially applied for the fund to help improve the course experience. And I'm replicating what we've been able to do with this course with my other course, 11092 and 592, the Renewable Energy Clinic. So essentially, I've been able to kill two stones with one bird from this fund. I guess I will start by saying I should first apologize the fact that I was not able to prepare any type of slide deck. But I will say that I first applied to the Campus Innovation Fund for mainly two reasons. One was to really learn and find out what sort of tools or functions are available on the Canvas platform that I'm yet aware of. I'm sure there are many cool features that I'm still not making a use of. So that was one thing. And secondly, really to improve the experience of my students and my course TAs. And I thought of this as less of just shoring up the course page, but really an opportunity to improve the teaching and learning experience. That sort of goes both ways. And Aaron just walk you through the process, and that the process on its own was very helpful. And I'll share a bit about my experience with that. So before I walked into the meeting room with Lauren Totino, I was thinking maybe about three or four things I was hoping to address through this experience. One is I wanted to enable some kind of an interactive reading experience within the Canvas platform. And we have, like many other courses are meant to have required readings each week. And I wanted to explore ways to encourage the students have conversations and communications among them, so with each other, as well as be able to ask questions on the Canvas platform, because some students may be shy. We might run out of time in class. So I wanted to extend that opportunity outside of class time and enable that as part of the Canvas platform. And is there a feature? Because I am a fan of perusal. I've used Perusal for other things. But I wanted to make it seem like it's less daunting, less sort of a requirement, and not something that's mandatory for anyone to be able to post a question, and we'll check that off as you got your 1 point out of the week. But I just really wanted to make it informal, and enable this discussion about the readings, about the course content. And we were able to do that. And the way that we were able to do it is we were able to come up with these weekly course pages where it's almost like a summary, or it looks like an agenda of like what we're going to cover each week. It's like an overview of the week. And we have direct links to the particular materials, particular readings. And when you click on the readings, you could add comments to the particular readings, and it kind of acts like a discussion board on some kind of online course, which I think is really nice. It's less like Perusal, but it's more like just a tag along kind of commenting feature where you can ask questions, and students could respond to the questions that other students might have asked. So I think that's one of the key features that I really like that we were able to implement. And secondly, because of the nature of my course, which is we've created a separate online course comprised of 4 modules, 1 module per week. It's currently hosted on the MITx platform, offered on a rolling basis, self-paced, and anyone who has access to the internet can take it for free. It's a MOOC essentially. And we use that as part of the course at MIT for MIT students. So before this, what had to happen was that I would have to request every semester to clone that MITx course and make it an in-residence version exclusive to my students who enroll in my MIT class, taking for credit. And I would have to have my TAs help me to get all the students who register for the class every semester to enroll in that in-residence version of the online course separately. And the students will have to navigate between the Canvas site where we host the readings, and also log in to the in-residence version of the MOOC, and complete that every week during the first 4 to 5 weeks of the semester. And that was a little cumbersome, and we found out through this program that there's a feature where we could directly embed the online modules into the Canvas platform. So the students no longer will have to navigate between the two or open up another browser to log in again and access the online course. We're able to break apart the online course itself by adding a module per week in the respective weeks in our course schedule. Add that to the Canvas site, so you can actually go through and view the online module content within Canvas, and complete the assignments and videos, watch the videos directly on the Canvas site and complete the online modules, which is really nice. And we've been able to test that. It works quite well. The only thing we are trying to figure out is how to view, because we have an exam towards the end. And the way that it worked previously, we were able to download the results of the exam from each student on the MITx course platform, and we'll be able to see which questions the students got wrong or missed. So we'll be able to sort of analyze, across the board, what are some common mistakes students make, so we can actually cover that in class. And we were at first trying to figure out how to do that on the Canvas platform. And later we found out there's sort of a workaround to be able to view or download the results from of all the questions that are offered as part of the exam, and be able to view the results directly. And that was not possible on the Canvas platform itself, but we were able to figure out a workaround. So we're still kind of learning our way and kind of optimize our experience using the embedded version of the online course. And another thing that we were hoping to implement is sort of along the same similar lines, try to embed sort of the grading scheme that could be configured entirely on Canvas and somewhat automated. And even though we were using the grading feature or the grades page on Canvas, we didn't really use it to generate the final grade, the course grade for the semester previous to this. And now everything is integrated. So, the assignments, the online course, and we've been able to bake in all of the graded components of the class, and the weighted scores so that the final grade can be automatically generated towards the end of the semester, which is really nice, and we've been able to really make use of that. And one other feature that we were not fully aware of, but are actively using now is Qwickly. And I'm still, from the era of using Stellar, and we used to do attendance the old-fashioned way. And Qwickly really literally changed our lives and made it a lot easier for us to track attendance, which is one of the things that belongs in the bucket of, we seem to know that there are these additional cool features, but because we were never nudged to try them, we never had to try them, and we obviously we're using Canvas, but we're losing out on the opportunity, and we've been able to learn these various features that we were previously not making a good use of, and now has become a common practice for all of my courses that I offer each semester. So those are some key features or functions that we were able to implement through the Canvas Innovation Fund. And I think I try to describe sort of the issues we were trying to address and how we addressed them. And I guess I could sort of end with kind of some reflection points of not by way of particular advice or anything like that, but some of the things that I would particularly highlight in retrospect. So one is, as Aaron mentioned, recruiting a past student who enrolled in your class, I think is crucial. And sometimes it might not be possible. And the Canvas Innovation Fund team could help recruiting a student, but I would highly recommend asking one of your recent students who successfully completed your courses to participate as the student staff or researcher that would be working with the Canvas Innovation Fund team to help you with the course. Because it's really important for the student to really understand the course dynamics, and they'll be able to come up with additional ideas about how they could do better or implement additional features or functions, because they can think and offer advice based on student experience, because they've completed the course themselves, and they know what their experience was and how this could really help improve the experience from the student's perspective. So I would really highly recommend that. And what's also nice is that the Campus Innovation Fund team offers help when we're making a transition from the student who's helped implement these features to the course TA that's joining the following semester, when we first would be piloting all of the changes that are implemented. And the staff, in my case, Lauren Totino was willing to meet with our incoming course TA and give them an onboarding tour of what was newly implemented, so that the course team can actually make use of all the new features, which was really nice. And I will also stress the opportunity to replicate some of the things that were implemented to the other courses, even though the summer worth or the semester worth of the Campus Innovation Fund experience would only be subject to one course. You could totally replicate what you've done because you can see all the features, and you might be able to work with your TA to implement the same kind of changes to many of the other courses you may be offering in the future. And the first onboarding meeting with Lauren was also very helpful because we were able to sort of co-define the initial scope of work, and I came in with several objectives. But we were able to really come up with a detailed plan for what we could do. And we would, again, as Aaron laid out the process, during the midpoint review, you're able to ask questions, and they'll be able to, the student who's helping with making those changes will be able to incorporate your suggestions or feedback before we get to the final version of the Canvas site, which is, I think one of the highlights of the program. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it is really truly less than 2 hours end to end. So it's not at all burdensome to you as instructors. And you will really truly see the value of the student putting in the time working with the Campus Innovation Fund staff. So I would really highly recommend all instructors and faculty to really take use of this opportunity. So that's all I had thought about sharing with you all, and happy to answer any questions later on in the session.
So you're going to hear from me a lot of the same things that you heard, and my endorsement is as enthusiastic as it can possibly be. I've taken a different approach to the narrative arc. So tell you a little bit about my courses, but also what the idea was and where I was coming from. So I'm going to talk about two courses because it goes back to what Jungwoo was saying. We started off with one course, but now it applies to another one. 21W015 is writing about sports. It's a CHW. 21W747 is my rhetoric class. And I just put a screenshot here of all the different Canvas classes that I have access to, and it's just a small number of them. But you see, CIMs, CIHs, all kinds of things. So the work that we do in RAP extends across many different disciplines and programs. So let me give you a bit of a context of where I'm coming from in terms of how I was thinking about this project. Even when I first started doing my PhD, let's say, I was thinking about academic literacy and communication as an activity system where you have students, engineers, professionals who essentially are trying to they have a research question or a design problem, so they are the subjects and they have an object, and the outcome is new knowledge, innovations, and decisions. All of that happens within the context of the norms of their discipline, the professional communities that they belong in, and the institutional structures, their labs, and so on that they are part of. But one of my main interests, even back when I was starting, was thinking about the tools and instruments that they use. And that includes software, but also the technologies and the genres that they use. So one of the main things that I learned starting off in this field is that what scientists do, scientific communication, is shaped by tools, technologies, conventions of their disciplines, and the collaborative nature of scientific research. And the goal is to influence all of these choices. So I have a very big interest in the technologies that help shape scientific communication. And then when I moved to Carnegie Mellon and I had more contact with colleagues from the learning sciences, that's one of the books that they published back then. These are all colleagues from Carnegie Mellon. They came up with a set of let's say, principles for teaching, things like how we organize knowledge has an effect on how we learn and how we apply our learning, things that have to do with mastery, building component skills and practice integrating them. But then the most important one, and the one that I spent a lot of years thinking about, was about practice and feedback. How goal-directed practice, if you couple it with targeted feedback, enhances the quality of students' learning, which is what we're really trying to do. And in terms of the rhetorical stuff, to bring in a little bit of ancient Greek words into the mix, the idea behind rhetorical skill acquisition is that you can do it a couple of ways. One is by habit formation. You give 1,000 talks, and by 995, you're probably going to get it right. Or you build the disposition through observation and feedback. So you observe expert performances, people doing the thing, the talk, the text, whatever it is, really well, or you give and receive feedback. So the big question then is, how do you build all of these things? So here's a very small detour about scaffolding, because I know that Aaron likes the idea of scaffolding. This is my granddaughter that you see here. And I've coached soccer for 25 years plus. My daughter sent me this and said, "Oh, she's playing soccer. She's 2.5." And I said, "Oh, she's doing exactly the thing that 2.5-year-olds are supposed to do." Can you tell what it is that they do? She's looking at the ball. She's looking at her feet, right? And this is the first thing that you're going to see little kids do. And that's where you have to start building capacity on how not to do that, because once you move on to adults or even teenagers and professionals, you have to learn how to play without looking at the ball. And here come tools. There's even a tool that's like goggles that don't allow you to look at the ball on your feet. So all of these are fascinating to me, thinking about the tools that you use to scaffold this kind of professional practice. Of course, it can go very far. I don't know how many of you follow soccer. This is the Italian U21 team, and they try to scaffold their practice by, doing the pirate thing and shutting off one of their eyes as they practice so that they have a better sense of peripheral vision. All I'm trying to say is there's a lot of work happening in so many fields in how we scaffold and how we provide feedback. So to go to our classes, thinking about these two um, courses, the learning goals, these are learning goals from the CHWs, are really to help students create and shape texts in relation to, rhetorical goals, purposes, audience, situations, but also how to understand and critique each other's texts constructively and productively. And in many ways, we use the peer review process for the purposes of doing that, but we also give them obviously feedback. What we do have is really cool tools, and Canvas Speed Grader is one of them, that allow us to do that kind of thing on their writing, right? You have a text, and then you can go and start adding comments here, which are specifically about this part, this word, this kind of rhetorical choice in this paragraph, and so on and so forth. And I've redacted the names of the students, but these are student comments, these are my comments, so you can have a shared space for this kind of feedback to happen to support this scaffolding. The problem was we don't have a tool like that for oral presentations. So, like Jungwoo said, it was very important that when I saw the Canvas Innovation Fund last year, there already was a student who was working on different things like sports stuff and had taken my writing about sports class. And I knew I could kind of trust to say, "Oh, can we sit down and figure out how to create a peer feedback mechanism for oral presentations?" And I was very lucky that Aaron was also there and available to help us go through the process. So my original oral communication feedback mechanism was just a Qualtrics page, which students had access to real time as their fellow students were presenting, and they would just drag and drop items of what worked well, the overall structure, and so on. But again, it didn't really say anything about specific parts of their talk, how they handled, this argument, this kind of connection, and so on, which was not great and also very cumbersome on my part because I had to, after getting all the Qualtrics data, kind of separate them by student, and then send them to each one by email. Very complicated. I did talk to students a lot about feedback, so they knew what they were doing, in the sense that this is one of the slides that I show them what is feedback and what it's supposed to do, guide future behavior. And we did talk about constructive, actionable, and timely feedback as the three components of effective feedback. And yes, the real-time thing was timely in the sense that, if I had time, I could send them the email the same day. And yes, it was kind of actionable depending on what things they told them, but it was not very constructive in the sense that it didn't point to specific things that they were doing. They would tell their fellow student, overall, I liked your delivery. What part? What is it that worked well? How can I build on that? The other thing that I talked to them when it comes to feedback was you have to describe what you see first and evaluate next. Not just say, oh, I like that, but I see you doing X. I see you in your introduction, the way you frame this actually works well for this audience because. And then the evaluation is, and you did a good job, and so on. So, in that sense, again, having another kind of tool that would help that model of describing and evaluating would have been much better. We did have, in terms of affordances, the ability to get recordings of student work very easily because I teach in a Zoom-enabled classroom most of the time in E17-136. So I can simply just go through start the Zoom session, click record, and then I have a recording of this whole thing along with the transcription, and we're going to see why this is important. So given all of that, I went into this thing not knowing what would happen. And that first session, that first design session, I would say it was one of the most generative things in the whole process. Because I knew what my goals were, I knew what my pain points were, I had some frameworks in mind, I kind of had a sense of the affordances, the recording stuff, but no idea how we can use Canvas to create a tool that would support this learning activity. And then sitting down with Aaron and Nicholas for, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, it was extremely, and that's a screenshot from the board that we were putting notes on. It was extremely generative to think about my goals overall. So think of it as a pedagogically informed meeting. And also, based on these goals, what are the kinds of things that we could be doing, not just in terms of Canvas, but also in terms of the overall ecosystem of the course? So the solution was to come up with, to use Panopto to upload video on Canvas and then use one of the tools within Panopto, which I didn't even know existed, to give students the ability to share feedback with each other. So that part, uploading video on Canvas, again, I didn't know much about, so they guided me through that, how it can be possible. And it's very straightforward, especially if you have the video from the recording from the classroom. But the most important piece was the discussion feature within Panopto, where you have a presentation. Here you see a presentation, the slide deck, and up here on the right-hand side, you see the actual, presentation in a very small window, but you can still see what they're doing and hear what they're saying. But then fellow students can actually start providing them with feedback on specific instances, slides, ways of delivery, ways of arguing, structural things of what they said. Again, I've redacted the names, but you can see it ended up being there was a comment every like 10, 15 seconds by someone building up on each other on how the whole presentation was unfolding. And another thing that came up was within Panopto, and that goes now to the second class, the Rhetoric class, because I started using Panopto also in that class. I realized that since we had the transcript and we had like a recording of everybody's mini speeches or whatever it is that we were doing, I could also search for things. So whenever I had something that would be a topic or a concept or whatever, they and I could search for that concept, and I just put, the word better there to see how many times it would show up, because then they wouldn't have to watch the whole thing all over again, but they could pick up on certain core concepts, on certain core ideas, and then go back to the discussion page and leave a comment there. So that was also another thing that I recently found out that helped build off of the original process. Last thing I'll say about this process is at the end, it was very important that we had a handoff meeting where Nicholas essentially provided me with all the documentation of how the process would go. And you can see here screenshots, different steps, how to provide feedback and so on, but also how this would fit in the overall ecosystem of the class and how we should structure the modules and some of the ways that it would make more sense for students to have the modules named and by date and so on. So all of that very quickly went into the hands of the students in the new class. It so happens we don't have TAs in our classes. So there was no need to train the new TA. I'm the TA. But I was able to take all of these documents, put them up on Canvas, and then the new students in the class had a way to understand how to engage in that process. So the documentation part was fantastic too. And it worked. Here are a couple of quotes from students. What did you learn overall about presenting by the process of giving feedback? Well, I noticed things, but it was also important to think what was effective? What would I want to consider including in any of the future presentations? And that comes from the comments. And actually, one student said it made the whole process of learning much faster and clearer. So, my overall experience and my final verdict. One, it was a great thing to have the opportunity to reflect on the learning goals and the student learning experience, especially in that kickoff session, that design session, and then even the midterm, the second session that we had. That's extremely important. Two, it was an opportunity to test the tool within an environment that's familiar both for me and for the students and see how it works in terms of student learning and engagement. Three, I got a complete package with documentation and instructions to launch within a semester with, I would say, very little effort on my end in the sense that I didn't really have to be on top of a student working over the summer, every week. And finally, it was great to work with a nice, very knowledgeable people at ODL. So I didn't know what the scale was to rate this experience, but I gave it 5 out of 5 canvases. You see what generative AI can do? You can say, give me 5 canvases, and it does that. So the goal for the future, if I had a magic wand, I would take this and extend it and say, now that we have the ability to give feedback this way to the students, let's see if we can have categories that they can easily work with. And that was the idea behind the project I was working called Metallogon, but that's for an extension of Canvas one day. So thank you, and we'll take questions.
Thank you so much, Andreas, for sharing. Really lovely 5 canvases picture. Thank you for that also. We'll open up for Q&A, but I see there's a couple of things in the chat I just want to address. One is that the MITx-Canvas integration that Jungwoo was talking about, that is currently specific to Canvas use here at MIT. There's another question about whether student workers involved in the CF are able to work remote, and Aaron and or Lauren, maybe either of you want to chime in on that in terms of what students have done in the past.
Yeah, it really depends on the specifics of the project, but that is a possibility. So we have run projects where the student has been completely remote. For various projects, sometimes being in person, especially for at least one of the meetings, especially the kickoff, can sometimes be a benefit, but we understand that that's not always possible. So yeah, if you have specific questions or anybody wants any follow-up about more details, we're happy to connect on that. You can reach out directly to me and we can chat about your specific case and what you're sort of imagining and whether that might be a good fit or not.
Really glad to have heard from both Andreas and Jungwoo. I thought it was really great to kind of hear, I think learning about tools or options available to you that maybe, could help you in some ways, if only you had known, has been a key outcome of that. And really interesting to hear like how the tools can help with the interaction among students, right? Whether it's like giving, receiving feedback, being able to answer questions and annotate things together. As well as the sort of transition from a summer sort of project into like what do you actually do would come fall or spring, depending on when you're teaching. So kind of hearing from your perspectives how all of that played out has been really helpful. So thank you again.
It's a great question, and the answer shortly is no. We've actually had some examples within the biology department of, the instructor of record needs to be in support of the project, but they don't necessarily need to be involved as long as you as one of the instructors is part of it. So you'd want to get them on board generally, but they don't necessarily need to be part of the meetings if they're okay with that being part of the work that you do.
Take a little crack at this one. Pedagogical innovation is hard in the sense that when you're caught in the work of the semester, let's say it's spring, right? We're just out of spring break and we're moving towards finals. Nobody's thinking about what's going to happen in the fall right now. The fall is like 6 centuries away. So one of the things that might be interesting to think about is the periodicity of teaching. So when somebody comes and says, "Oh, I have this real concern about how I'm teaching this in my fall class," you kind of have to catch them in the fall class when they're really experiencing that problem to kind of get their attention. Now, if it's something that's an ongoing question, like I had this issue with, how do we give feedback on oral presentations in general? You have my attention throughout the semester. But again, it's not something that if it's not pressing enough, if it's not like a major pain point, you're not going to get people to say, let me add one more thing on my plate, especially for the summer. You kind of have to catch them at the point when they're really feeling the burn of the issue. Does that make sense?
If there's no other burning questions, I think we will bring this talk to an end. But thank you all for coming here on a Friday, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your semesters. As always, feel free to reach out to residential education if you want more information or have very specific questions around whether this is something good for you or not. We're happy to talk things through as well. All right. Thank you again to Jungwoo and Andreas, and hope to see you all at a future xTalk. Bye.